My parents destroyed my life and stole my identity, but what I found hidden in their safe changed everything. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. I used to think helping family meant letting them take whatever they needed. Dad would borrow money for poker games. Mom would laugh it off at dinner, and I'd convince myself this was normal. When I got my first marketing job, they celebrated like they'd won the lottery. Looking back, maybe they had. The warning signs were everywhere, but I was blind to them. Dad's gambling wasn't just weekend fun, it was an addiction that consumed everything. Mom covered his losses by borrowing from relatives, always promising to pay them back. When Aunt Carol pulled me aside at Christmas, warning that enabling them would cost me everything, I laughed it off. I was 24, and thought I understood family loyalty. The first real shock came when Dad asked for $3,000 for urgent bills. I said no for the first time in my life. His face went dark, but he nodded like he understood. A week later, I found a credit card statement in my name, charges all from the local casino. Mom claimed it was for family groceries with a straight face. That's when Melissa, my best friend since college, started pushing me to freeze my credit. But it was already too late. My work bonus disappeared overnight, 2 days after I told Mom she couldn't have it. The money was gone. She called it a temporary transfer and wouldn't look me in the eye. Rebecca, my financial advisor, traced the withdrawal to Dad's account number. I changed every password I had, convinced I was being paranoid. The truth was so much worse. The letter from the bank congratulating me on my new personal loan felt like a punch to the gut. I'd never applied for anything. Dad admitted he'd handled some paperwork to help with cash flow, like he was doing me a favor. When my manager James asked if I was okay, I lied and said it was just family drama. The shame was eating me alive. Then my brother Tyler pulled me aside one evening. Looking guilty as hell, he told me Dad had pressured him to sign loan documents using my information, promising it was just paperwork. Tyler had refused, but he warned me Dad was getting desperate. That same night, Aunt Carol called saying she'd overheard Mom asking about my retirement account. My stomach dropped. Rebecca's call 3 days later changed everything. She'd found 3 more accounts opened in my name over the past year. 2 were maxed out. 1 had cash advances withdrawn at casinos I'd never been to. The numbers were staggering, over $40,000 in debt I didn't know existed. When I confronted Mom, she insisted Dad would sort it out if I stopped making a fuss. The breaking point came when Melissa spotted Dad at the casino with a stack of chips, handing what looked like my debit card to the cashier. When I checked my account, another $1,000 was gone. Mom claimed it was a bank error and promised to fix it. I froze every account I could access, but the damage felt infinite. At Sunday dinner, I laid out every bank statement and loan document on the table like evidence at a crime scene. Dad actually smirked, saying I was making a scene. Mom avoided eye contact, stirring her coffee like nothing was happening. I told them I was closing every joint account and filing a police report. Tyler's eyes went wide. Aunt Carol nodded in approval. Dad's face darkened, but for the first time in months, I felt powerful. Dad leaned back and laughed. "You wouldn't dare," he said, tapping the papers with his finger. "You don't have the backbone." Mom warned that airing family business would ruin me. I hit record on my phone, keeping my hands steady. Melissa had coached me to keep them talking. Each smug comment only made my decision easier. The next morning, Rebecca and I walked into the bank with copies of forged signatures. The manager's face went pale as she confirmed security footage showed Dad making withdrawals on my accounts using fake identification. My chest tightened, but I stayed composed. I signed paperwork to freeze every account and open new ones under a different address. It was the first irreversible step. When I got home, Dad was pacing on the porch like a caged animal. He demanded to know why his access to the bank was blocked. I told him it was my money, my name, my future. He shouted about betrayal, but I noticed him glancing toward the mailbox. Inside was another credit card bill with my name and his signature, proof he's kept going even after our confrontation. The lawyer downtown reviewed everything: loan documents, forged signatures, bank footage. He told me I had an airtight case, but warned that family fraud cases get messy fast. My stomach churned at pressing charges against my parents, but his calm assurance steadied me. He explained identity theft protection and criminal charges. For the first time, I saw a clear path forward. That night, Tyler showed up with an old showbox that would change everything. Inside were casino receipts, pawn slips, and a handwritten list of accounts Dad had bragged about draining. But there was something else: business cards from people with names I didn't recognize. Amounts written in Dad's handwriting that were way bigger than what he'd stolen from me. "I'm done covering for them," Tyler said, his voice shaking. "But you need to know this goes deeper than just our family." He pulled out a photo from the bottom of the box. Dad shaking hands with a man in an expensive suit outside a casino. On the back, someone had written "Phoenix Connection, $50 monthly." Before I could process what that meant, Dad showed up at my office the next day with flowers and an apology. He said he'd return everything if I kept it between us. James overheard and warned it sounded like a setup. That night, Melissa discovered my cloud storage had been accessed from Dad's IP address. The apology was fake. He was trying to wipe the evidence before I could act. I restored the deleted files from Melissa's hidden backup, but something was bothering me about that photo Tyler had shown me. I did some digging online and found the man in the expensive suit, Vincent Morrison, arrested 3 years ago for running an identity theft ring in Arizona. The charges had been dropped due to insufficient evidence. James arranged a meeting with Sarah Chen, a journalist friend who specialized in financial fraud. When I showed her the photo and Tyler's business cards, her whole demeanor changed. She recognized patterns linked to something much bigger than family theft. "If you go public with this," she said, "you're not just exposing your parents. You're potentially bringing down a network." The scope terrified me, but it also meant I wasn't just a victim of family drama, I was sitting on evidence of organized crime. Sarah set a 48-hour deadline before running the story. That night, Dad left a handwritten note under my door: "Family doesn't betray family." Inside was a thumb drive with fake documents, meant to discredit me, but there was also something that made my blood run cold: screenshots of conversations between him and Vincent Morrison about handling problems. I uploaded my real files to multiple platforms before Dad could strike back. Within an hour, Melissa spotted anonymous accounts trying to discredit me in local forums, using Dad's fake documents. James advised against responding publicly, yet it was hard staying silent, but I knew the truth would hit harder if my first move was undeniable. Sarah called. She'd verified my documents and traced the forged signatures to other victims in 3 neighboring counties. But here's what made my hands shake: the pattern matched federal cases involving Vincent Morrison's network. This wasn't just family betrayal anymore. This was organized crime, and my parents were foot soldiers. The article went live at sunrise with a headline that made my phone explode: "Local marketing executive exposes multi-state identity theft ring through parents' fraud." By noon, my phone was flooded with calls, strangers offering support, distant relatives calling me a liar, and something that scared me more than anything, reporters saying the BI had reached out about my case. That's when things got dangerous. A private number called that night. The voice was calm, professional. "Miss Chen's article was very interesting. So was your cooperation with law enforcement. Stop digging, or we'll make sure you can't dig anymore." I recorded the call and immediately contacted Sarah, who told me to get somewhere public and stay there. The BI took over my case the next morning. Agent Martinez explained that my evidence had connected dots they'd been trying to connect for 2 years. Vincent Morrison's network stretched across 7 states, using gambling debts to recruit people like my father into identity theft schemes. My parents weren't just thieves, they were part of a criminal organization. But the real shock came when they executed search warrants on my parents' house and safety deposit boxes. Inside the boxes, they found stacks of cash, pawn tickets, and photocopies of my driver's license and social security card. The terrifying part: similar copies for dozens of other people. Organized by state and date, my parents had been harvesting identities on an industrial scale. The federal courthouse was a circus when my parents were arraigned on racketeering charges, alongside Vincent Morrison and 8 others. I watched from the gallery as Dad's smug confidence crumbled when he realized the scope of what he was facing. This wasn't a family court anymore, this was federal prison time. Sarah's follow-up articles revealed the network's structure. Vincent Morrison recruited people with gambling debts, taught them to steal from family members first, then expand to friends and neighbors. The stolen identities were sold to other criminals for drug purchases, illegal firearms, and more fraud. My parents had been in this system for 3 years. During the trial, I learned the full horror of what they'd done. Tyler testified about finding fake IDs in Dad's workshop. Aunt Carol revealed that Mom had tried to get her social security number for insurance purposes. The evidence painted a picture of my parents as predators who had targeted everyone they claimed to love. The breakthrough came when federal agents raided a storage unit linked to Vincent Morrison. Inside, they found filing cabinets full of stolen identities, including detailed instructions my father had written about how to forge my signature. There were photos of me at work, copies of my mail, even surveillance notes about my daily routine. They'd been studying me like a target. But what chilled me to the bone was finding my brother's information in there too. Tyler had been marked as next target with a timeline for when to begin stealing from him. If I hadn't fought back, he would have been next. Then Aunt Carol. Then everyone we knew. The federal trial lasted 6 weeks. I testified about the family fraud, but the prosecution focused on the larger network. They showed how Vincent Morrison had created a systematic approach to turning family members into identity thieves, using gambling addiction as leverage. 23 people were convicted, including my parents. The restitution orders totaled more than $8 million across all victims. I received a check for $73,000, not everything I'd lost, but more than I'd ever expected to see again. But the money wasn't the victory. The victory was the letter from the Victim Services Coordinator. My case had led to new federal legislation requiring banks to verify identities more thoroughly before opening accounts. The Morrison network, as it became known, had been completely dismantled. Over 200 victims had been identified across the country, and my decision to go public had triggered the investigation that brought them all justice. 6 months after the federal convictions, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a newspaper clipping about another identity theft ring being busted in Texas, with a handwritten note, "Your courage started this, thank you." It was signed by someone I'd never met, another victim who had found the strength to come forward because of my story. I started working with a nonprofit that helps victims of financial abuse navigate the legal system. On my first day, I met Maria, a 60-year-old woman whose son had stolen her retirement savings for drug money. As she told her story, I heard echoes of my own journey: the denial, the shame, the fear that fighting back would destroy her family. "But your family is already destroyed," I told her, repeating words Sarah had said to me. "The question is whether you're going to rebuild it on truth or let them keep building it on lies." Today, I lead a support group that meets every Wednesday at the community center. We use my case as a framework for understanding the warning signs of family fraud. But every week someone shares a story that reminds me how widespread this really is. Financial abuse within families isn't rare, it's just rarely reported. The last time I saw my parents was through the courthouse window as they were transported to federal prison. They'll be eligible for parole in 8 years. I don't know if I'll be ready to see them then, and I don't spend time wondering. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt, they're meant to stay burned as a warning to anyone who might try to cross them. Tyler and I have rebuilt our relationship on a foundation of truth instead of denial. He testified against our parents because he realized that protecting them had nearly cost him his own future. Now he volunteers with the nonprofit, helping other family members navigate the decision to report financial abuse. What I learned through all of this isn't that family doesn't matter, it's that family that hurts you without consequence isn't really family at all. The people who stood by me through the investigation, the trial, and the aftermath: Melissa and Carol, Tyler, when he finally chose truth over loyalty, they became my real family. The nonprofit receives calls every week from people who found my story online. Some are in the early stages of discovering fraud. Others have been suffering for years. Each conversation reminds me that the silence I broke wasn't just mine, it belonged to everyone who thought they had to suffer alone. Last month, I spoke at a banking conference about the Morrison Network case. In the audience was Agent Martinez, who had become a specialist in family-based financial fraud. After my presentation, he told me something that still gives me chills: "Without your case, we estimate Morrison's network would have continued operating for another decade. You didn't just save yourself, you saved hundreds of people who don't even know it yet. The money is gone, but it was never really mine anyway. What I kept was something Vincent Morrison's network could never steal: the knowledge that I'm stronger than the people who tried to break me. And that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's making sure it never happens to anyone else." Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe to check out more stories on my channel.